If you find yourself in constant conversations with your children about spending too much time on devices like this, but you remember spending a lot of time on devices like this, and you're not so sure why there's a difference, but deep down you do, and you'd like some answers, watch this video. Hi everyone, BJ here. There's endless videos on the internet that are talking to you about screen time and the dangers of screen time. That's not where this video's going. I want to instead dive a little deeper to help empower you as a parent to understand what's the difference between what I like to call old school screen time and now school screen time. What's the difference between these two experiences? And how can you explain that to your children so you can make wise decisions? Screen time and limiting screen time is often a place that causes a lot of conflict in family life. I want to help you turn it into a place where there's cooperation instead. When we were kids and these types of games were popular, we weren't talking so much about the dangers of screen time the way we do now. Back then, and tell me in the comments, what was your system? Nintendo, Atari, ColecoVision, anybody out there? What was it? Comments below. But when we were kids, the most you heard about the dangers of so much time on video games was that children weren't as active as much, which meant they might be putting on some more weight. We weren't talking about brain development, emotional intelligence, socialization, all kinds of mental health challenges. That just wasn't in the conversation. I want to talk to you about why that is. What's the difference between old school screen time and now school screen time, and how that needs to change the conversation that you and your child are having. There's lots of ways to compare these two types of screen time. I'm going to give you three lenses to look through. The first lens is game design. When we were kids, old school screen time, the game design was really trying to challenge you as a player. They wanted to keep you, the game developers that is, in the game, playing the game. And to do so, they needed to make the game challenging, but not too challenging. If you look at the way games were designed, you'll see level 1 in every game is really not that hard. And you can easily defeat that level once you've gotten good at it. Think about Super Mario Brothers. First things you do are learn how to walk, jump, and jump on a Goomba, which is the easiest enemy they have. You'll learn what a mushroom does and what a flower does and what a star does. But after that, it starts to get more challenging. In fact, when they designed Super Mario Brothers 2 in America, it was totally different than the version that came out in Japan. The version that came out in Japan, the developers looked at and said, this is too hard for American kids. And so they created a whole different version of it. The game developers' way of designing the game was based on keeping you involved just by increasing the challenge and rewarding you at the end of each level with some sort of an accomplishment. By contrast, now screen time is totally different. The game designers understand a whole lot more about the brain than they used to. And so now, yes, their goal is to still keep you online and keep you involved playing that game, but they're using your very brain against you. We understand now how to increase someone's attention on something, how to use dopamine to reward you at a brain level so you keep on playing. And that's why you see these games nowadays that you get badges for reaching a certain milestone and share this little thing on social media about your new achievement. And there's constant little rewards. And even to the point now where if you're not playing one of these games for a while and then you come back, the game automatically gives you free coins to spend in the little shop and other rewards to kind of hook you back in. They're using your brain against you in the process. And that's really the first danger that we now come across that's different in our conversation with our children. We need to talk about how Scripture doesn't talk about addiction per se, but it talks about being captive. And Ephesians 4 really hones in on it, that we don't want anything to keep us captive. So we need to be careful of this. That's one of the main differences of screen time, old school versus now school. The second lens we can look through to compare old school screen time and now school screen time is the lens of socialization. Back then, we all had to gather in each other's basements or family rooms to play together. We would buy a game. Your friend would have the newest game. You'd go over to their house and you'd play together. There might be just you and your friend. There might be 5 or 6 of you there. And you would play together. You would celebrate each other's achievements. You would hand the controller off when there was a difficult boss to beat and you wanted to get past it and you knew your friend could do that, so they'd show you the tricks. There was an entire community being built around here that was in person together. There's something different about being in person that we pick up on that we don't get quite the same way when it's virtual. Now, school games are a bit different. There's a couple of different categories. There are a lot of games where you're just playing on your own. You play the game on your own and you're sort of isolated from the rest of the world. And you might post on social media or on some sort of a board that tells everybody how you're doing, but it's still just personal to you. And so there's no real connection. Other games connect you directly with other players and friends where you all decide to meet online to play a certain game together and you team up and try to defeat other enemies and things like that. So there is some socialization going on, but you're not in the same room. You might be on a headset. You might not even be talking at all, but you're playing together. So the ability to build community is reduced simply because we're not physically together the same way. Now, I do want to note a generational difference here. Younger generations are starting to meet online before they meet in person. Instead of what we do for generations like mine, where we meet each other in person and then we follow each other online. Younger generations sometimes are doing that in reverse. And there's actually some data out there to suggest that this is not necessarily a bad thing, but I want you to note ultimately it gets back to being in person, whether you met first online or first in person. So no matter what generation you're from, it seems all generations can agree online only relationships and friendships can only go so far and can only benefit us all in as a community so much. In person is really something different. The third lens I want to look through right now is the lens of money. How did they make money back then versus now? Well, back then, you and I went to the store, we bought a new game, and the game developers made money. And if they wanted more money, they had to make another game, and so on and so on and so on. The money was being made by the game you were playing. That's it. Now, though, it's entirely different. Sometimes you're not even charged for the game. Think of all the different games you could right now download for free on a device that you own and start playing. Where's the money being made? The money's being made in advertising. The money is being made in your purchases in the game. As they incentivize you to keep playing more by rewarding you with hits of dopamine, you're more likely to pay more or spend more time on screen. In the process, they're able to earn money off of anything you buy, as well as sell the fact that you're spending so much time in this game to advertisers. What is really the product is not the game, it's you. Your time, your attention, your data is the real moneymaker for the game developer when the game's free. Now, yes, there's still games that you have to pay for, but even there, we're so interconnected on the internet that those game developers are able to do a couple of things. One, they're able to put advertising and change the advertising up in the middle of games that you're purchasing, and they're able to also still use your data and your time on screen to show others, hey, we've got ways that you can make money. If you give us money, you'll make more money. The money's being made off of us, not off of the product of the game. We're the product all of a sudden. When you put those three lenses together, you suddenly can see the difference. We've incentivized the wrong behaviors. We've made it profitable for game developers to do things we shouldn't want them to do, to use our own brains against us, to keep us on their screens longer so we play longer, which gives them more time, more attention, and more data that they can turn around and sell for more money. So we've become the product rather than the consumer. And that's why this and this are very different. And the results are in. You could go to all those other videos I mentioned and start seeing that when you see these increases in screen time, whether that's games like I'm pointing out here, or anything else, videos and other things, we see increases in depression, increases in social isolation, loneliness, suicidal thoughts. In fact, suicide is now the second leading cause of death amongst our youth. Something's got to change. The problem is we're not listening to the Bible's instructions. What does the Bible say about screen time? Well, let's talk about that, because obviously there's nothing in there about screens, right? But When you think about being held captive, God's word tells us not to be held captive to anything in this world. And yet, we're being held captive in our screen time to the algorithm. And that's the danger for our children. They're being held captive to an algorithm that knows them better than they know themselves. So, how do we move forward and help our children? So, this isn't a battlefield of family life, but a place of cooperation and teamwork. The first thing we need to do is help our children understand the difference between tech savvy and tech wise. For many of our children, they know their way around our devices better than we do. And we're handing them our device. Can you help me figure out how to do this setting? Can you help me figure out how to delete this thing? And they know how to do it and they make it look so simple. That's because they're tech savvy. But tech wise is something else. Tech wise is not something you gain just because you turned a certain age. So saying, oh, when you're 14, you automatically get a phone, or when you're 16, you automatically get to be on social media, or anything like that, isn't really what we need to do. We need to be thinking about being tech wise and developing maturity. Ephesians 4 talks about the standard we should have for maturity, that we should be growing more and more mature to be like Jesus Christ. And so for some children, maybe 16 is a good time. 16 means you can be social on social media. That might work, but you might have a kid who's not ready for that. And so you might decide to delay. Those are all parenting decisions that you need to make together with your child to make the best choices for what works for your kid. But to do that, the second thing we need to really be focused in on is not the rules around what's going to guide technology in our home, but the relationships that will support the types of rules we put in place. We need to be intentionally investing into the relationships we have with our children, no matter what age they are, no matter how young or how old they are. We need to be investing in relationships, because if we don't have a close relationship with our child, but we want to call them on their screen time and address this hard issue we see developing, it's going to be difficult. The closer we are relationally, the more our child's able to see that we're on the same team as them. This is not parents versus kids and we're going to duke it out. This is parents on the side of kids trying to take on the challenges that these things present. And so we're going to work as a team. We can develop some basic household guidelines together. Being able to say to a kid who's 13, 14, 15 years old, I want you to come up with a technology plan for yourself and present it to your mom and I so we can look at it together and decide how it sounds and what else might need to be there, and then have your kid go off and do that. Well, that's going to take a lot of relationship and a lot of trust. But I tell you, you do something like that, you're immediately transferring some responsibility to your child and saying you're responsible for self-discipline as well. And so you need to be working on this with us, and we'll have a conversation about what you develop. And for some kids, it's going to sound great. And we're going to be like, wow, that's really mature what you wrote there. For other kids, it's going to be like, yeah, that's a good start. Let's talk about some other scenarios you didn't think about. What about screens upstairs in your bedroom? What about screens over here? What about that? And develop that list together. A lot of parents hear what I just said there and say, that sounds great, BJ, but I have no idea how to navigate that type of a conversation with my kid, or how to build a relationship to sustain that type of a conversation. And that's where I want to introduce you to a great resource from the National Center for Biblical Parenting, an online course called Technology Wellness at Home. It's focused on creating a team of you and your child around technology to prevent and address electronics addiction and how to manage technology in family life. You can check it out in the link I'll put down below. And if you'd like to see my interview with Scott Turansky, the developer of the Technology Wellness at Home course, you want to